Good afternoon. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources that we hope will help improve your life. I'm Stu Reid. Here's my co-host, Dave Burstein. Hey, Dave.
Hey, I got some delightful stuff to talk about for the first half of the show.
Okay,
There's lots of bad news out there,
that's for sure.
and we'll get to some of that in the second half of the show. But Jenny and I, Sunday night, went to one of the greatest concerts of our life.
Really?
Yep, and it only cost $5. That was also amazing.
Got a concert for $5 in New York City? That's unheard of.
I'm going to talk about for the first half of the show because I got a lot of examples like that.
Hmm.
Good things that are free and cheap. The concert was Ruben Blades with the New York Philharmonic in Philharmonic Hall
Hmm.
and Lincoln Center, now on a number of their things, about two a month, is pay what you want
Hey, what you want? Wow.
with $5 minimum, $35 recommended.
Hmm.
Money's a little tight, so we got the $5 seats. We wound up in the 12th row of the orchestra
Wow.
because all
Orchestra.
it does.
$5? That's unheard of, Dave.
How well do you know the music of Ruben Blades?
I don't know him at all. I think he's what, Panamanian?
He is
I,
Pat.
I only know of him. I don't know his music.
Well, he and Willie Colon
Hmm.
40 years ago did something that was almost an opera, Nuestra Vida, about our life in the barrio.
Hmm.
And they blew away the lat. They're both among the biggest stars ever in Latin
Yeah,
music.
Willie Colon is a household name. Him I know well. Hmm.
Yeah. Uh, and they had an enormously successful album, so they could do whatever they want for the next one. So they sat and they did this, and it has a whole lot of rhythms that could have been the Fania All Stars, the salsa, the mambo, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
on.
yeah.
But it also comes a lot out of jazz, as Willie Colon also did, and even some stuff that I recognized where it was coming from in classical.
Mhm.
They put together this concert in 1980. It became it the record didn't sell that well. Fania was not happy, but it's become famous. In fact, Ruben Blades did it in Venezuela a few years ago for 200,000 people live.
Wow. Now, what's the name of the piece or the album, Dave?
It's something like I'm not pronouncing it right. Nuestra Vida. It's our
Okay.
life.
Hmm.
It's a love story and a family story, but there's more to it than that. Manuela, he has songs about each piece of the life of Manuela, and I forget, and a tailor she married, whose name I'm forgetting. And for each bit, he has a rousing song. So Manuela was described as the most beautiful woman in the barrio, and everybody wanted her. That was a song. And you can imagine making a love song out of that. She married this tailor. They were both poor for all their time. They had a son, Ramiro, which is what this much of the second half of the concert is about. And what happened to him, he had the kind of thing, he had drug problems, he had poverty problems, but at the end, he came to some revelations. So this is the kind of heavy duty stuff. If he had added more to the orchestration, they could have played it at the Met. It
Wow.
was that. And what made it very good, he said, and why people are still talking about it and still listening to it,
Mhm.
is it was simple
Mhm.
and it didn't preach anything. The Times Review trashed it for not having enough character development
Yeah,
and
well.
said so many possibilities.
Hmm.
Well, he wasn't trying to write Anna Karenina.
Right.
He was trying to write something that said, this is what our life was like.
Mhm.
And he grew up in the barrio himself.
Wow. That's some fascinating stuff. And for those of our listeners who might be wondering, well, what the heck does this have to do with technology and community? Well, I would say,
No technology, but community.
yes, and
Talking
a
to
and a break from technology, Dave. A break from technology. Go see and hear some real performance, some real folks giving a real concert, as opposed to the live stream or the TikTok or wherever. So much of the stuff that we consume today that we call entertainment. Live entertainment is alive and well. And for the $5 per concert, that's amazing.
and cheap, and that's what I'm bringing to the first half of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Center, which gets a lot of money from New York State and New York City, wants to serve. And Lincoln Center, big performances. As I say, Ruben Blades, who is one of the greatest of all time in Latin music, a hero throughout Latin America, was one concert and full backing of the Philharmonic, uh, and some other singers he brought in. And it is pay what you wish. $35 recommended, but as little as $5.
Wow, that's amazing.
Jenny and I did the $5, and we wound up with seats in the 12th row of the
Mm-hmm.
orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what something that builds our community, and that Lincoln Center is very aware of what they're trying to do and build the community like
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just fabulous.
That's remarkable.
So I'm putting together a website called uh, New York Free and Cheap. So
Free
I
and
did
cheap? Okay.
cheap for what you can do in New York that's either free or cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And that was why I wanted to bring it to the show here, the Ruben Blades concert, as an example of what's out there. And I would go every month or every week to lincolncenter.org itself because they do much more than this. One of the finest events I've been to it twice now. In the summer, they bring a few dancers out. It was outdoors the first time I saw it. The next year, they had to cancel it because they said, we can't ask people to dance 95 degrees. And they moved it indoors into Geffen Hall. Geffen Hall, incidentally, is the best. It has schools that may even be better than Carnegie Hall. It's as good
Really?
as any they've ever been. You
Hmm.
can sit up in the third balcony.
Mhm.
Balconies. You can sit in the back of the balcony and hear perfectly, which is a pleasure. They solved the acoustics problem.
Mhm.
So, who did they bring in for a dance concert? One of about 50 free events they do every summer. Well, they brought a few companies in. They started out with City Ballet,
Mhm.
possibly the finest dance company in history, and still with us, still dancing, lots of balancing. They added to that Alvin Ailey,
Mhm.
and nothing I've ever seen in dance surpasses some of the things I've seen the Ailey Company do. I saw Judith Jamison doing Cry.
Mhm.
Have you ever seen Judith Jamison? Was still alive.
I'm pretty sure I did back in the 70s, Dave, but I can't say what performance it was. but I would add I've seen some the dance I'm gonna miscall their name, but the national dance company from Senegal. I remember seeing them at a big concert hall. This is going back in the 70s, 80s, and they did some stunning stuff, Dave, that I had never seen before. Incredible stuff. There's so much good dance out there, and there's so few venues and places where you can actually see and experience it. That's
Free.
I guess that's the beauty of this, and I look forward to that site you're putting together. You and I go back many decades, and I can remember, Dave, back in the day when we were youngsters, that there was music all over New York City during the summertime. A lot of it free, and today it's much harder to find. So that's going to be a very valuable site that you put together.
And I'll talk about it here. In fact, let me just finish about the dance concerts. One of the many things they do free, usually outdoors, Lincoln Center, all summer long, often name brand headliners, famous folks, very creatively programmed. It also brought on ballet theater and one that I had never seen before, Ballet Hispanica.
Hmm.
And they stole the show.
Really? Hmm.
Not that they were better dancers than the city ballet soloists who were there, but they had so much energy and so much enthusiasm.
Hmm.
They stole the show against some of the finest dancers in the world.
Hmm. Hmm.
Finest dancers in the world for free? What can you ask that's better than that? That is worth remembering. It's in August, and you definitely should figure out how to get to see it.
Okay, let's bookmark that one, Dave.
1,000 seats. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, so let's make sure we bookmark that one and bring it up again later on in the season as it's available.
Now, let me tell you about the music you're talking about. One of the most exciting evenings of my life was on, I forget whether it was 135th Street or 145th Street. Dizzy Gillespie on Jazzmobile.
Oh, Jacksonville, yeah, yeah.
And it turned out that an old man waved from the window above. Turned out to be Dizzy's old teacher, Dizzy said.
Oh, wow.
And Billy Taylor sat in with Dizzy Gillespie's orchestra.
Hmm.
People were dancing in the streets.
Yeah, yeah.
Unforgettable.
Yeah, Dizzy was very special, very accessible, touched people. And, I can still remember my mom, who is long gone. Uh, we grew up in Cleveland, and she told stories about being in the clubs as a young woman, hanging out with my dad. And she said whenever Dizzy came through, he always remembered her and called her by name. And, she was nobody. But that's how personable a guy Dizzy was. He was something else. In addition to being a brilliant musician.
I We should know in a future show how Dizzy built the jazz community and some of the other things about Dizzy, which is totally appropriate. But Bird and Diz, possibly the finest jazz ever done.
Yeah,
Two of the finest musicians of the 20th century.
yeah.
And Dizzy was there playing for free for the
Mhm.
people in the street.
Mhm.
Now, say you can't find this so much anymore.
No.
Well, a few more things. Jazzmobile is still with us.
Hmm.
And through the summer, usually on Wednesday or Thursday evenings, they come to Grant's Tomb, where there's a big open space,
Right.
bring a flatbed truck,
Hmm.
they bring in first-rate musicians. Houston Pearson was there not long, and as I say, I saw it years ago with Dizzy Gillespie. Now,
Hmm.
there's no one alive, I think, who matches Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker.
Well, they transformed the whole musical scene, Dave. They were revolutionary. I mean, there are a lot of good musicians today, but to have the impact that those two guys did have on the music, coming out of the swing era into bebop, they invented bebop. I can remember. I think it was. I'm not sure who it was. It was. Who's the Heidi Ho guy?
Uh,
You know
I'm
what I'm talking about. Anyway, he took he yeah.
five. I'll look
His name will come. I'm blanking on his name, but some of the
on
old timers in the early '40s when the bebop guys came along, they were listening. He called Charlie Parker's music Chinese music because it was so advanced. Their ears, couldn't hear it. And so, they really transformed the whole musical landscape, Bird and Dizzy, and impacted jazz and American music for the next probably 30, 40 years, if not more. So yeah, they were phenomenal, and you can still hear the echoes in the music today. Again, bebop was born right here in New York City with those two guys. So that was amazing. So, well,
I, I know some of these stories because
mhm,
I started out listening to classical, including some contemporary classical, when I got out on my own and started buying records. But then I realized I really preferred to listen to Charlie Parker.
mhm,
There's
yeah,
there's no one.
yeah, authentic American music, and of course, not to say anything that folks don't already know, but the real genius of jazz is its basis in improvisation. Unlike classical music where, every note is written down and the musicians faithfully play the notes as it was recorded by the composer. With jazz, you get an outline, you might get a theme, you might get a melody, but from there, you go off on your own into improvisation. And it's just really the ultimate in creativity. And, the tunes sound different every time you hear it. When you hear Beethoven's Fifth, it sounds the same almost every time you hear it. You hear the jazz guys play a tune, it's going to change dramatically. Yeah, I know the tempo and the pacing of the classical music may change, but the notes don't change. And y-
That Ruben Cologne and Ruben Blades did.
mm,
It took music, and on the stage was his band and his singers, Ruben Blades, Sunday night, and 24 musicians of the New York Philharmonic.
okay.
So it was Ruben Blades and strings, but
Hmm.
some strings you could ever find. And the piece worked really well with both
Yeah, yeah.
on.
Nice counterpoint. Charlie Parker played with strings. You know, a lot of the arrangers, in order to kind of soften and make some of the more avant-garde jazz more palatable, would include strings in the arrangements to kind of soften it and lighten it and make it a little more accessible. But it sounds like what you're talking about was a
This
little
wasn't,
more robust than that.
yeah, this wasn't softening and lightening anything.
Okay.
Those violinists on stage, and there were, I don't know, 15 of them or so, were just going away as
Mhm.
though they would have been playing double time like bebop.
Okay.
And that was all written by Willa Cologne and
Hmm.
Ruben. How
Hmm.
much time do we have in the first half?
Well, we've got another 7 minutes before we got to take a break. We've been talking about the community aspect, in particular community arts, community music, free entertainment, really discounted $5 concerts at Lincoln Center. Uh, so yeah, we've been talking about community, but now as we wind that up, Dave, what's going on with technology before we go into our break? Is there any breaking story
And
you want
I've got two fabulous new software programs coming from the AI guys.
to? Mm-hmm.
Keep going on free and cheap concerts in New York.
Okay, Dave is calling the tune, free and cheap concerts. You know, Dave, I was just talking with some of my associates today. Uh, you know, you talk about just the impact of art. And I was recounting going to one of the very first performances of The Wiz on Broadway. My wife at that time, my girlfriend, uh, was working with one of the big TV companies, and we got comp tickets. Her job was to go research talent. Anyway, long story short, we got orchestra seats, the seats that you got for $5 or 12th row back, which this is back in the '70s, was impossible to get. But somehow we got them, and the Wiz, Dave, that production. I've never seen dancing like that. I've never seen costuming like that, and the way that they transformed that cute, funny little story about the Wizard of Oz. They just transformed it into a whole nother genre. It was spectacular. George Faison did the choreography. Stephanie Mills was the lead singer. Felicia Rashad was in it. Ted Ross was the lion. So much incredible talent, singing and dancing, and it stuck with me. That was 50 years ago, Dave. Well, close to it's 40 plus years ago, and I think it was the first time probably since the '20s, since Shuffle Along and some of the early breakthroughs on Broadway with black folks. I think this was a resurgence of blacks on Broadway, and just much the way that we talked about the Bird and Dizzy transforming music. I believe that production really just had incredible impact on Broadway and on theater, and it was just phenomenal. I just wanted to mention that.
And I'm going to change what I was going to say and hold over to the next some of the other free things, like two fabulous Shakespeare in the Park companies. One of them is the Harlem Classical Theater, but that's going to be next week's show because I wanted to talk about that. How strong a baseball player was Jackie Robinson or Satchel Paige?
You said compared to Satchel Paige or the two of them? I mean,
Any, all of them.
they're phenomenal. Satchel Paige never got his due because he didn't get a chance to play in the major leagues. But I mean, he would have probably totally dominated. And Jackie Robinson, I mean, in addition to the courage that he had to break the color line and to put up with all the crap that he had to put up with, he was phenomenal. I don't think anybody had ever stolen home base before, and I mean, he did stuff that hadn't been done before. So he transformed the game. He was a phenom.
And the reason I wanted to go there, and we can go to the opera, we can go to Broadway, you just did, and it illustrates the enormous cost of discrimination. Not just the stuff people being discriminated have to put up with, but also the people doing the discrimination, especially hiring, really suffer. This is Gary Becker won a Nobel Prize for working up the economics of discrimination. And he had loads of data because if Ford wouldn't hire black people, well, that meant Ford lost a lot of the best potential employees. If baseball didn't hire black people, well, they wouldn't have Willie Mays or Roberto Clemente and so on. And as I was thinking through what is happening in this country, I'm ready in the second half of this show, if we make the time for it, to talk about the price of discrimination and what it's going to be costing us. And we all know some of the things that have been happening. So that's something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about getting rid of the anti-discrimination programs, DEI. And some of them are just nonsense. But in fact, effectively opening up, going to diverse people means you get better people, not people putting in just because of their color. Stu, how hard does a black person have to work to get ahead in this world?
Twice
I
as
think
hard as a white person did. Come on, I mean it's crazy. And when you look at the history, which they are, the corollary to what you're talking about, what's happening politically, is that they're trying to erase our history in this country, the contributions that Black folks made. And when if you dig deep into the history, you will find that so many of the advances in technology, in agriculture, in science were pioneered by and led by people of color. Often, however, we were relegated to the background, to the lab assistant, and the white guy who was in charge of the scientific facility or the university or the laboratory took credit for the breakthrough and often got credit for the invention when in fact it was a black person that did the inventing. So in many ways, we black folks have been responsible for much of the development of this country. Not even talking about our labor, our free labor that we contributed for 200-300 years. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about the intellectual knowledge and scientific knowledge that we have and that we have contributed to this country. And now, the backlash that we're seeing with the current administration is an attempt to whitewash that, to erase that, and we got to stand up, and we've got to restore our history and restore the real narrative of this country and the contributions that non-whites have made and continue to make.
we all pay a price for the discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
I would not have been able to watch Willie Mays play baseball if Jackie Robinson hadn't first broken the color line.
Mm-hmm.
And he put a lot of horrible things happened.
Yeah.
When it was his first year. So discrimination, and we all know why I'm bringing that up this year, is something that cost all of us. Period. Now,
yeah, the oppressor suffers in many different ways, but the oppressor suffers as does the oppressee. So it really cuts both ways.
that's something that there's a whole lot of people in Washington and in Silicon Valley who don't appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas right now, I'm in a country where you can be put in jail for wearing Air Jordans and a Jordan t-shirt. Well, we got to take a break. Do the ID, Stu.
Yeah, I want to hear about that. That's interesting, Dave. But you're listening to Community and Technology. First half of the show, we've been focusing on community for a change. As we segue to the second half, we'll bring in more of the technology impact. Anyway, Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a brief musical break. Okay, we're back. Community Technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid on WHCR 90.3 FM. Dave, before the break, you were talking about folks being arrested for T-shirts and sneakers that they're wearing. What's that about? And where did this happen? That wasn't in this country.
I deliberately put the first half of the show something that can be excited. Free and cheap concerts in New York. And I saw Ruben Blades Sunday night, Jenny Lowe for $5 in Lincoln Center. Unfortunately, there's a whole lot else happening. Stu, did you know that you could go to jail for wearing an Air Jordan t-shirt?
No, that's no. I did not know that, Dave. How does that happen, and where did that happen?
Much more horrible than you could imagine. Trump sent 300 people to a jail in El Salvador, famous for how horrible it was and the torture that went out there. He said they were all gangsters from Venezuela. Said it was a gang, Trendy Aruga. Well, many of them had nothing whatsoever to do with the gang, and that's coming out in the news. Half a dozen different places I've seen in the last week. Where did they find the people they said were part of this gang? Beside the issue of why they were sent to a torture chamber in Salvador, well, it came out in court. The Justice Department had to explain how they chose the people they said were part of a terrorist gang. If you had 8 points, you were considered to be a member of the gang. What gave you 8 points? Well, admitting you were a member of the gang even gave you 10 points. But what were some of the other things? Well, they said if you wear symbols of the gang, like an Air Jordan t-shirt, that's 4 points towards the 8 points that can get you to a Salvadorian prison, deported, with no hearing, no judge, no means of appeals. In addition to which, if you have a tattoo of a crown, well, that's a
crown?
You know, like what the King of England wears?
Yeah. What? Wow.
That's another 4 points. So if you did and there've been, it's come back to court already, that people had a tattoo of a crown with the word mother over it as a symbol of their mother. You put that and you wear flash clothing, specifically including Jordan line of clothing. That's Michael Jordan's overpriced t-shirt. The US government, and this is straight from the Justice Department, considers it you're a member of this gang, you're not a Venezuelan refugee, and have put 300 people on flights to prison in El Salvador. That was one of the most horrible things I've heard, and there's been a lot of horrible things lately. Well, let's
That's
go.
so crazy, Dave. That is harkens back to really some fascist type of behavior, locking people up or condemning people to be locked up because of how they look, how they dress, what they wear. Um, that's
I
that's some
didn't want
pretty
to
fascist stuff.
know how much it costs for an Air Jordan t-shirt, but I found a $7 patch that says Jordan on it.
Mhm.
And I ordered it from Amazon. And next week, in the video part of the show, I'm going to hold it up and say, I could get arrested for this and deported.
Wow, wow. Hmm.
Put on my t-shirt
Mhm.
from my friend Emmanuel 2600 that says, this is an illegal munition. It's a t-shirt they did when the government declared cryptography illegal and to export because it was critical munition. In other words, a banner with an equation to do the cryptography technically was illegal to wear on an airplane to Canada.
Wait,
You were,
back up, Dave. Say that again. A T-shirt that had an equation that expressed what?
the equation was the heart of cryptography.
Cryptography.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So this is how you encoded something,
Okay.
so nobody could interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
That if I wore that T-shirt to Canada, technically I was in violation of the law.
Wow.
That the kinds of things going on. So let's go to something that's great. Have you seen any of the Miyazaki and the Studio Ghibli uh, animations?
No, I have not.
Disney illustrators are among the people who think Miyazaki, Studio Ghibli in Japan, is the finest illustrator on earth. Princess Mononoke and a dozen others they've done over the years. And Disney, in fact, distributed them, at least one of them in the States. Fabulous stuff. Now, would you like to take something, say, people playing soccer, a video of the goaltender from Venezuela, who was one of the people who was accused of being a gang member and deported? I've got this right in front of me, the news story, and have all the people in that video look like they would in a Studio Ghibli animation. Think
Whoa. Okay, you're doing some AI photoshopping here, Dave.
it's beyond Photoshop. This is the latest version of OpenAI, that's behind ChatGPT,
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, creation software, generation software, that has the ability to generate something in whatever style you want. If you want it to look like Blade Runner or Mickey Mouse or Studio Ghibli, it's easy. Anybody with a regular account, and that's 20 million people? Yeah, 20 million people with ChatGPT can now do illustrations in the style of, and they did it so much that they had to shut down half of the people who were eligible. And Sam Altman said, our servers are burning up. Our people haven't been able to sleep all week
Mhm.
because that went viral. And everybody wanted to take every picture they had and make it into Studio Ghibli style. It
Wow.
was a big viral thing. It's so much that they literally had to cut off people on OpenAI because so many people wanted to use it. And
Yeah,
we're talking
this sounds like, although the uses that you're talking about right now might be benign, you're just talking about folks having fun with images and manipulating images. I see the flip side of that as something quite dangerous potentially, where you can create all kind of images of folks
Stu,
that are not real.
we got some stuff that I hate talking about coming up. I just did a story that I hate talking about. So let's not talk the downside.
Okay. Oh, you want to keep it light. Okay. So,
OPT
what are these folks doing? They're just having fun with family photos and stuff like that. What are they doing?
all over the net.
Hmm.
It's like, as I said, it brought down, or didn't bring down, it totally clogged so you couldn't get access to the servers. And we're talking about $10 billion worth of servers that OpenAI has access to, because that became a thing. So what I want to bring to this show, and we've brought lots of times to this show the things that can go wrong, is fabulous illustration coming from with ChatGPT. Second thing, Stu, what remarkable things can AI do?
Well, it can write your term paper. It can write proposals. It can probably write novels, if not already today. But pretty soon, it's going to be able to do that. All kind of creative production, for one.
Yeah. Well, if you want to do this stuff, or if you want to do doctoral level math and science,
Mhm.
Google will let you do it for free. In order to compete with the stuff that OpenAI and everybody and DeepSeek and China are doing, Google just made its most powerful model, Gemini 2.5 reasoning, which is called experimental, but it's working just fine, free.
Wow, what a marketing move, Dave. So they're really pumping the market and trying to get folks to jump on their bandwagon, it sounds like. That's pretty amazing. What kind
And
of response have they gotten?
not so much more because all the people who went to doing things with AI, they were
Mm,
Studio Ghibli out of the pictures of their kids
mm,
and everything else. But it's there, it's free, it's possibly the finest model available on Earth. It can solve problems that the average graduate student in physical mathematics has a problem with. That's how good it's become. There's a whole lot of things it can't do. That's another discussion. So I wanted to bring to this. So we had some technical stuff. Great illustration coming out of ChatGPT and great AI for free from Google. Probably going to cost them hundreds of millions of dollars in computer time, but that's what
yeah, but
competition is
they'll
about.
make it back. They'll make it back in sales. I'm not worried about Google
Oh,
financial position.
they kicked $60 billion to their stockholders in the last 2 years.
Mm,
They can afford it.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now, Dave,
Okay.
I wanted to mention something. It's not so much AI, but when you were talking about folks being locked up for what they wear, it triggered my memory of a story I just saw, and this is something that we covered a few years ago, where we were talking about facial recognition technology, and of course that's something that is AI is helping to make that get better and better, but it still has issues, still has problems. And one, the example that you raised was really heinous in that, folks are getting locked up and sent to really crazy facilities, lockup facilities. But right here in New York City at Madison Square Garden, we did a story a couple of years ago about how attorneys that were working with a law firm that had an action against MSG were barred from coming to games at the Garden simply because they worked for the law firms. And they were identified using facial recognition technology.
Are
And
you,
as far as I
uh,
know, it's held up in court because it's a private venue. They say they can do that.
Stu, are you saying that if I went to a Knicks game with 20,000 other people, they would identify me and all the other 20,000 people, or 98% of them, with
Yeah,
facial recognition
yeah,
software?
absolutely. Oh,
In New-
here comes Dave. There he is. But the latest story is a guy who apparently put together. He's been banned. He tried to go to a game, and he was told that he was banned for life from the venue and all other properties owned by MSG. That includes Radio City, the Beacon Theater, the Sphere, and the Chicago Theater. Banned for life. And he couldn't figure out what he had done or what the reasoning was. And then he finally figured out that he had designed a T-shirt, Dave, in reaction to James Dolan, the owner of MSG, son of Charles Dolan, the famous cable TV pioneer. When James Dolan got into an argument with Charles Oakley, a legal battle, and threw Oakley out of the venue. And this young man, his name is Miller, created a T-shirt that said "Ban Dolan," and apparently they found out about it. They identified folks wearing the shirt, connected it with him, and now he is banned for life for designing this T-shirt, Dave, that is critical of the owner of the team. So, you know, kind of innocuous. He's not getting locked up in jail. He's not being sent to some encampment. But still, you're just seeing the long arm of technology reaching out, identifying folks, and authority deciding. I mean, to me, it's amazing that this is held up in court. But the last thing that I read said that because it's a private venue, that is the Madison Square Garden, that they can do things like this. Pretty amazing.
And that is how good facial recognition is.
Mhm.
And imagine the things being done with it all around the world, most notably in Gaza, but
Mhm.
across China, and now in an awful lot of the United States. We actually have the equipment in the New York City subways to do it, but there were so many people complaining about it that they never turned it on.
Wow.
Ready to do that to catch fare jumpers.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we,
And of
we've talked about the high error rate, particularly with black people and especially with black females, misidentifying folks getting locked up. They were hundreds of miles away from some incident that happened that they got locked up for, but they happen to look like the perpetrator. So, folks think that technology has all this magic to it, but it is very error prone, particularly the facial recognition technology.
there are horrible things happening, so that the best people in AI, with very few exceptions, thinks it's really dangerous. Everybody knows that horrible things are happening. Everybody knows that it's going to make it easier for some people to do things like come up with chemical and biological weapons. And we talk about this on the show. One of the best in AI, Dario Modiai, he's the founder of Anthropic, one of the big companies here. Brilliant guy. Thinks that AI has a 75% chance of doing things like curing cancer in the next 10 years. He had a whole list of wonderful things that AI could do. But he also has talked, and he was a signer on a petition that I also signed that said that the advanced AI should be treated the way we treat climate change or nuclear weapons, as a threat to humanity that must be contained and must be dealt with. So he's working on it. He's building these things right and left. He's also got a large team working on how to prevent some of the harms, and he's hopeful he'll be able to do it. But
Wow.
nobody knows what's going on there. A couple of real quick stories.
Well,
Uh,
before we leave, I just want to get your opinion on one quick thing, Dave. There's this astrophysicist, Avi Loeb, a Harvard astrophysicist. He wrote a piece, and he talked about how he thought AI, superhuman AI, was closer than we think. And his reason was that we are relying less and less on our own brains, more and more on the computer, and that is going to retard our own development and accelerate the development of AI. Quoted some statistics where the IQ has fallen over the last 12 years or so, and some other declines in American brain capability. And he thinks that's going to maybe accelerate AI. What do you think about that?
well, if somebody they've done this, a number of educators have done this. And they saw which students used AI to do their term papers.
Mm-hmm.
And the term papers came out pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, a group in England of university people, I think they were doing psychology papers, sent them to the people who graded the regular psychology papers alongside the student papers. And the graders thought that the AI papers were better than what the students give. Problem: if you don't do the work and just have ChatGPT write your paper, you're probably not going to learn very much.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been confirmed in several studies that I'm not saying you shouldn't use ChatGPT, but you also should be doing the real work so that
Right.
you learn what
Mm-hmm.
you're able for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, we just got a couple minutes left, Dave. I know you wanted to hit a couple of things, and you had a kind of interesting kicker that you wanted to throw out.
That the United States tried to take over Canada, as you say, over 200 years ago, 1774, from the Washington Post. When Benjamin Franklin failed to make Canada the 14th colony, he and others in the Continental Congress sent a letter to the Canadians asking them to join the emerging American Union so that they would have all the natural rights of Englishmen, which was one of the slogans for the American Revolution. Well, the Canadians said no, partly because nearly everybody in Canada in 1774 were French, not English.
Catholic as well, not Protestants like the Americans.
Oh, and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to take over Canada. The Canadians said no. And I think the Canadians were happier that they said no and are not part of this country, especially today.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that answer stands. Okay, we're out of time, Dave. We got to wind it up here. This has been Community and Technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid on WHCR 90.3 FM every Wednesday, 5 to 6 p.m. on 90.3 FM, as well as on the web at whcr.org. Tune in. Just might learn something. Thanks. Good night.